Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Recoverable Grants webinar. Can everyone hear me all right? All right, perfect. For now, you'll see the panelists in view, and we have the camera turned off for all of our guests today. We're so excited that you joined us today to learn more about how Revolve is helping to bring solar energy to deserving communities around the country that lack access to solar financing, and how you can get involved through our Recoverable Grants opportunity that we'll be discussing today. My name is Sarah Cabell, and I'm the Director of Operations at Revolve as of 2 weeks ago. I handle all of Revolve's finance and operations, and today I'll be our guide through this discussion. You're going to hear from 4 speakers today: Emma Kulow, Pastor Curtis Robinson, Michael Ferrante, and Andreas Karelas. Emma Kulow is the Impact Investing Senior Partnerships Associate at Capshift, where she leads Capshift's exploration of recoverable grants and the ways donor-advised funds can leverage them to grow their impact. Today, she'll help us better understand how recoverable grants work and why Capshift has endorsed Revolve's recoverable grant offering. Pastor Curtis Robinson is the senior pastor at Faith Baptist Church in East Oakland, California, where he's been the pastor since 2010. In 2019, he was a Harvard University fellow, and before pastoring, he worked in investment banking for 25 years in San Francisco. Faith Baptist Church went solar with Revolve in 2016. We'll hear Pastor Curtis share about Faith Baptist's experience going solar with Revolve and how solar is benefiting the East Oakland community. Michael Ferrante is the founder of Trisolaris, a company focused on accelerating the deployment of renewable energy. Prior to Trisolaris, he was an executive vice president and chief of operations in healthcare technology for over 20 years. He is also one of the first investors to make a recoverable grant to Revolve through the donor-advised fund, his donor-advised fund, and will be talking to us about his experience. And then Andreas Karelas is the founder and executive director of Revolve, which he founded in 2011. He's the author of Climate Courage: How Tackling Climate Change Can Build Community, Transform the Economy, and Bridge the Political Divide in America. He's a regular op-ed contributor to The Hill as well. So welcome to all of our panelists. I'd like to note that during the presentations, as I mentioned, your cameras will be off and microphones will be muted. So if you have a question at any time, you can either chat directly to the panelists or the hosts, or you can also type into the Q&A chat box for our Q&A session later, and we'll get to as many questions as we can during that session later in the program. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Andreas to kick us off. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. And thanks everybody for taking the time to join us for this very exciting conversation. I want to start out, I'm not sure if folks had seen this, but last week, the EIA put out a report, basically a group of international energy experts put out a report that said that this is the decade that we have to ramp up clean energy adoption in order to solve the climate crisis. And that in order to do so, we will need to quadruple the amount of investment dollars that flow into clean energy from what was invested in the last 4 years. We will need to quadruple that in 2030, again, quadruple it in 2050. So that's a significant challenge. We have a lot of work ahead of us. The technology that we need to solve climate change is here, but we need to innovate around our financial vehicles in order to deploy that technology as quickly as possible. So what we do here at Revolve is focus on 3 of the big challenges that we see as mitigating the ability for us to deploy clean energy as quickly as possible. So the first of these challenges, as I'm sure many of you can relate, is the limited ability for citizens to drive clean energy adoption. How many of you have seen a climate change documentary and walked out of the theater or finished the program and thought, my goodness, this problem is so huge. I wish I could do something more about it, but what am I supposed to do? I'm just little old me. And a lot of people feel that way. And so this is something that we feel really strongly needs to be addressed in order to solve the climate crisis. People need to feel that they have the ability, the agency, the sense of empowerment in order to help create the solutions that we need. The second challenge, of course, is that clean energy finance in particular is not equally accessible to everyone. Uh, Disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, communities of color, we know have significantly less solar adoption than any other community. And in order for us to bring all people in America into the clean energy benefits that are available to us now, we have to solve this problem. We have to make sure that solar financing is able to reach those that it's typically unavailable to. And lastly, is the public awareness about clean energy. Still, many Americans don't realize that solar energy is the cheapest form of electricity in history. Many people still think of clean energy as something that will come down the road instead of something that's here for us right now that we can benefit from today. And so at the end of the day, Revolve is really a storytelling organization trying to raise awareness about clean energy at the community level. So Revolve is a nonprofit organization, a nonprofit climate justice organization that I started in 2011. And what we do is finance solar energy projects for fellow nonprofits around the country. And in the process, we are educating community members about the benefits of clean energy while we're training the next generation of clean energy leaders to lead those projects in the community. Now, why do we focus on helping nonprofits go solar? Well, this is a particular area of the solar market that has been historically left out. Uh, and there's three reasons why. The first is that nonprofits are unable to claim tax credits that are available to other solar customers because they don't pay taxes. The second is that it's very difficult for a nonprofit to prove its creditworthiness. There's not a similar mechanism to a FICO score, for example, that a residential customer could show a solar financier. And lastly, these projects are often too small for it to be worth it to overcome these obstacles. But the real reason why we focus on nonprofits is what we call the feedback loop. This also referred to as the contagious effect of solar or the ripple effect of solar. What it basically says is that what we've seen in the solar industry over the past few decades is that when someone goes solar in a neighborhood, their neighbor and then their neighbor are more and more likely to go solar. And this is really what I think of as a secret weapon in the climate fight. This is something that if we plant seeds, as the academic paper that I reference here refers to these projects as seed projects in what we call our revolving fund, the Solar Seed Fund. If we plant seeds in communities around the country, that can help accelerate the adoption of solar energy at the community level. And this study here that came out of Tufts that was focused on racial disparity among solar customers found that this seeding effect has an even more pronounced impact in communities of color, almost twice as much in African American communities. So this is a really powerful tool that we have in our tool belt and is really at the core of what Revolve does. So there are three pillars to our model, what we like to call empower, invest, and educate. And of course, these correlate to the three challenges that I just described. So the first step is what we call empowering people through our Solar Ambassador Fellowship program. This is a program where we train volunteers like you and I who care about climate change, who want to get involved, to go find a local nonprofit in their community and help that nonprofit through the process of going solar. Many of our fellows are college students, but it's not limited to college students. We have people of all ages who have gone through the program. The second step is the investment piece. This is the nuts and bolts of our financing operations. We offer a 20-year solar lease or power purchase agreement to nonprofit organizations that want to go solar. They pay zero down. They start saving at least 15% on their electricity bill in year one. During that 20-year service agreement, Revolve is covering all the operations and maintenance costs and making sure that the systems are working in tip-top shape. And at the end of that 20-year arrangement, the systems transfer to the nonprofit and for zero additional cost. And they get to own those systems and get free electricity for years to come. Lastly, Revolve focuses on educating the community through our community engagement work. This is through solar education and ribbon cutting events, through social media, through the press, through engaging community members with educational materials. And all of this is really targeted at two main goals. Number one, how can we get that seeding effect going? How can we get more people in the community to adopt solar energy themselves? And number two, how can we get them involved in advocating for clean energy and climate change policies at the local level? So a few of our projects, I'll give you a little sort of storytelling session. This is Harbor House in Oakland in the Fruitvale neighborhood. What they do is serve low-income immigrant and refugee families with a number of services, from after-school programs to summer camps for children to teaching English as a second language and workforce development for adults. This 14 kilowatt system is going to save the organization $130,000 on their electricity bills over the life of the solar system. Across the country in South Carolina, we're serving veterans at the VFW post 10804. This was the first VFW to go solar in South Carolina. And to point out this ripple effect of solar, the next year after this project went solar, the second VFW just in the town over went solar, also with our Coastal Carolina University solar ambassadors. And this project is saving them $33,000. I'll also point out that our partner, Vote Solar, used this project in an op-ed during a net metering battle in the state of South Carolina as an example of how solar energy is benefiting community members around the state. Lastly, some of our most recent projects that are still being built actually include the Augusta community projects, which is actually across 4 different sites that provide affordable housing to over 500 families. This 1.7, collectively 1.7 megawatts of carports that are being built right now will save those families $2.7 million on their electricity bills over time. This is a snapshot of the types of projects that Revolve has built to date. So you can see the projects serving BIPOC communities, veterans, youth, arts organizations, housing organizations, healthcare, animals, faith-based organizations, conservation work, community development, as well as food and agriculture. And every day we're getting increasing new opportunities, new leads coming in for a whole myriad of nonprofit organizations that are looking to benefit from solar energy. So to date, I'm really proud to say that we have close to $10 million of solar that we have contracted that amounts to 3.3 megawatts of solar in 10 states for 45 nonprofits. Those nonprofits are collectively serving about 60,000 people. And those organizations are now going to save $17 million on their electricity bills that they can put back into their mission, back into serving their community. We've trained over 350 solar ambassadors who have led these projects that are gaining real-world clean energy industry experience. And through the process, we've saved 175 million pounds of carbon from being emitted into the atmosphere. And importantly, for the investors on the call, I want to point out that we have had 100% repayment rate from all of our projects to date, and we plan on continuing to keep it that way. Now, one of the exciting stories to tell here is actually the growth of the Revolve deployment of our projects. So if you see here, what has happened in this graph might look comical, or might even look uh, fantastical, but basically what you see is from 2013 to 2019, we were crowdfunding the cost of every upfront project one at a time. And we had significant growth each year, but it wasn't until 2020 when we were partnering with a provider that was able to give us access to working capital that allowed us to have a tremendous growth where we closed close to $9 million in 1 year, which was just leaps and bounds ahead of what it was the previous year. So this is not a projection. This is the actual growth that Revolve has seen. And this brings us to today, to the topic of conversation today, which is Revolve is now seeing the tremendous opportunity, the demand for the services that we offer. And we want to be able to offer that to that many more nonprofits. And so that's why we're raising an additional $10 million to be able to do this year in and year out. So the predictions for next year and the following years, if we're successful in this current raise of $10 million, and we will deploy that over the next 18 months, we hope to then follow up in the following 2 to 3 years with $15 million raise and eventually a $25 million raise. So you are tuning in at a very exciting moment for Revolve, and we hope that you'll join us in making these realities come to be. So a quick overview about recoverable grants from my limited understanding, and then I'll pass it off to Emma, who will be able to walk you through the nuts and bolts a little bit more. But the first step is that the impact investor makes a investment of a recoverable grant to Revolve. Revolve then invests that capital in these nonprofit solar energy projects that are benefiting the community. The nonprofits are saving money on their electricity bills while they pay Revolve back over time, and Revolve then repays the impact investors with interest. So as I mentioned, we're raising $10 million to help us continue to deploy these solar energy projects for nonprofits around the country. We have 2 investment opportunities today. We have the first is a 9-year payback period with 1% interest and annual payments. And the second is a 15-year payback period with 1.75% interest. So with that, I will now pass it off to the expert, to Emma Kulow, who comes from Capshift, to tell us a little bit more about how this recoverable grant concept works. Thanks so much, Emma.
Great. Thank you, Andreas. As Sarah mentioned earlier and Andreas mentioned just now, I'm an Impact Investing Senior Partnerships Associate at Capshift, which is an impact investing platform focused especially on philanthropy. We work a lot with recoverable grants, so very excited to be here today sharing more about what they are and how they can be really catalytic in helping Revolve. As somebody has already asked in the conversation, in the Q&A box, the recoverable grants are a tool that are used by donor-advised funds. So I'll start off and give a bit of background about what donor-advised funds are and really how recoverable grants can be used by them, and the real ultimate purpose today of how they can help Revolve continue its excellent work with community solar. So to start off with the basics, a donor-advised fund is a charitable savings account, essentially. Donors contribute to their donor-advised fund and receive an immediate tax deduction, and then the dollars stay in their account until the donor decides where they want to grant them out. So they are a philanthropic vehicle that many of you on the call will be familiar with, because it's a really exciting and values-aligned tool to be a philanthropist and support charitable causes. Recoverable grants are an especially exciting and innovative tool because they can help donors with their donor-advised funds multiply the impact of their grant making. So you're all familiar with grants, I'm sure, and recoverable grants are exactly what they sound like: grants with the potential to be recovered, along with the possibility of a small return. In the case that we're talking about with Revolve's $10 million recoverable grant raise, A donor advised fund, or a donor would make a donor recoverable grant through their donor advised fund to Revolve. And as Andreas showed in his graph, Revolve would then use the funds to help other nonprofits access solar energy through their 20-year-long projects. The revenues created by Revolve's projects may then flow back to the donor advised fund to repay the initial grant and provide a small return of 1 to 1.75% over the course of 9 to 15 years, which is the terms that Andreas outlined earlier. In this setup, Revolve receives the funding it needs to do its critical community solar work, while the donor has the potential to use those same granted funds for future grant making. At Capshift, we found that recoverable grants are an increasingly popular way for donors to provide catalytic and sustainable funding to the nonprofits whose work they really care about. They are a cutting-edge tool to really unlock and expand what philanthropy can do. That's the essential nuts and bolts of recoverable grants and why we're talking about them here today. We are going to shift back to really learning more about Revolve and the work that Revolve does. I think in the short term, if you're interested in learning more about recoverable grants, Capshift is hosting a one-on-one conversation about them later this week. I'll drop a link into the webinar chat so you can register if you are interested. And at Capshift, we're very excited to be Revolve's partner in supporting their recoverable grant raise. And if you're interested, above all, in making a recoverable grant to Revolve, as Andreas will walk you through later, all you need to do is reach out to Revolve. So thank you all. Happy to address any questions over the Q&A chat. And Andreas, I'll pass it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Emma. Really appreciate that overview. And now I would like to invite my panelists to join me. Pastor Curtis Robinson from Faith Baptist Church and Michael Ferrante of Trisolaris. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Andreas.
Hello.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, yeah, Pastor Curtis, I'll start with you. First of all, thank you both for taking the time here and for working with Revolve over the years in the various capacities. Pastor Curtis, I would love it if you could tell me a little bit about yourself, your role at Faith Baptist Church, and its history in the East Oakland community.
Great. Thank you so much, Andreas. So my name is Curtis Robinson, as Brother Karelas has already suggested, and I'm the senior pastor at the Faith Church, and just very happy to be on this panel with Mr. Michael Ferrante, who is, I think, a water walker who's looking to bring real change to this industry and to do some tremendous things. So just a little bit about myself. Let's see, I like to be personal sometimes, right? I'm like celebrating my 34th year wedding anniversary, on yesterday. So I'm still
congratulations.
If you see that glow, it's because I feel real good. So again, Faith Church, Oakland, California. Been there for 11 years. It's been good work, man, Andreas. We talked, and I want to just kind of like lay a little bit more of my background because I have been in the investment banking industry before. And it's kind of unusual for a pastor per se. They go like, what does a pastor know about this kind of stuff? So just to tell you a few energy deals that I've done, when I worked with a firm at 101 California, we participated in Bloom Energy, Kleiner Perkins deal. I just looked a few things up. Amorous, also Ascent Solar at another firm. Sirius Materials was another clean energy firm. And some of you may have heard of Fisker Automotive, right? Which we missed because the owners were talking about should we do Tesla or should we do Fisker, right? So I always wear this hat sometimes to show me the money that I did not make and how we missed out on Tesla. So I do have a pretty good background when it comes to clean tech, clean energy. I helped raise millions of dollars for these particular initiatives. So, when Andreas came along and said, hey, we could do clean energy and we could do it at your church, I was like, oh, that's great, right? Because I understand the concept already. So we got engaged, we got involved, and I walked my congregation through it. And if there are any pastors on this call, the best place for you to really get your congregation to buy into this is through the pulpit, right? The Bible talks about this all the time. As a matter of fact, in Genesis, and I don't know if there are any biblicists out there or whatever, but the Bible is a book. It is a literary piece of material. And, you know, God tells us, you know, in Genesis that we are to watch over the garden, you know, tend it, you know, be conservationists to a certain extent, right? To be accountable, you know, to the planet, you know, watch over the garden. So, you know, I began to preach a series of sermons as such. And then, you know, I got some pushback, you know, but, you know, when you're doing the right thing, you know, you should always get pushback, because that's just wind in your sail that makes you go higher as you get into this project. So we just kept pushing it. We also have a food pantry, right? Like this year, we'll probably give out like probably 100, more than that, close to like 300 tons of food. This year, we've been pretty right on spot, you know, through this pandemic. We got lines around the corner. And again, I pastor a Black and brown community, right? You know, that is gentrified. And it has been economically denied, right? You know, so, you know, teaching my constituents energy conservation not only helps them to understand, you know, what our plight is, but it also helps them to understand that this is probably one of the largest economic opportunities that we will see. This is an opportunity for people to come out of the dungeons, and I can say this because I have no vested interest in coal, nor am I scared to say it, right? You know, come out of the doldrums of a grid that is antiquated, right? And to move ourselves into a new space and use clean energy to propel this country and the world to the next level. So Andreas said, hey, you know, let me put some solar panels on your roof. I was like, hey, yes, let's get it done. He got together with his team. I got together with my team. We came together and met somewhere in the middle. And I tell you this, we did a crowdfunding campaign, right? Because the project cost about $35,000, I think. And we have 20 solar panels on our roof right now. We raised that money in, I think 6 hours, right? And then the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation. I've never met Leonardo. Hey, Leonardo, thank you so much, brother, if you're listening. He chimed in, Michael, and it was done. It was a done deal, right? And I'll tell you today that in the middle of this pandemic, we haven't had a PG&E bill, Pacific Gas and Electric. You're probably watching, but it's the truth. Haven't had a PG&E bill in like 3 years. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that, right? But it's the truth. You know, every time I open up our PG&E bill, it's a negative, right? And so to even go to the next level, now we're involved in a grant with the San Francisco Foundation that is trying to help us to recover this energy so we could be, quote unquote, you know, stores of energy and potentially maybe resell that energy to the community at a deep discount, or just give it away free, right? It's from the sun. It didn't cost us anything anyway. So, you know, that's our story. I hope I said something comprehensive on that, you know, and that's all I got. You got any questions? You can ask Andreas.
Thanks, Pastor Curtis. And yeah, I had some questions here prepared, but you told the whole story. So
sorry.
really, so you knew where I was going with it. But I guess, you know, one of the questions, I guess, was, you know, when you, because we've worked with a lot of churches over the years, and a lot of times there is pushback, you know, like you said, a lot of times, you know, an organization that we talk to, they might take some time to discuss it with their team and with their parish. And with you, it seemed so easy. It was so quick. You know, you got it right away, why this was going to benefit the community. And it seemed that you were able to, you know, go back to your, you know, parish council and community and get everybody on board very quickly. What do you think it was? What do you think, what was the message that you used to reach your congregation to get them on board with moving ahead with the Revolve Solar project?
A great question, Andreas. So, again, let me reiterate, it was my knowledge, my learning curve was probably far ahead of many people, right? When you're like pitching a John Doerr deal, right? Like Bloom Energy, right? Which is trading publicly on the markets right now. And when you're in that vein, you have to learn what is going on. You just can't get on the phone or get in a meeting and say, hi, I'm Kurt, I'm doing Bloom Energy, send me your money. No, you got to understand what's going on, in the whole entire sector, right? With Amyris. Amyris started out, just taking sugar cane, trying to experiment with jet fuel, in Brazil. John Mello went to UC Berkeley. Now, the company has transitioned, they're doing something else, but they're still doing sustainable products, right? Ascent Solar, thin film photovoltaic layers of solar panels that are on satellites and, helping people to get energy in hard to get places like like Antarctica, right? Series Materials, which, came up with some drywall to what they call quiet rock, which was, again, another kind of company that uses that platform, right? And it's, again, clean energy, right? And then Fisker Automotive, Fisker, Tesla, same thing pretty much, right? So, I had a very strong, working knowledge and vocabulary when it came to clean energy. I knew the space. I knew the space. So because I know the Bible and, I'm working on my dissertation right now. I'm trying to get a PhD in New Testament preaching. And so I need y'all prayer because I keep changing my title of the dissertation, like it's my 8th time, right? But, knowing the Bible, knowing the space, it was a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. And so whatever challenges I had that came from my congregation, it was like, great question. Let me answer that for you.
Yes, that's beautiful.
I'm sorry, let me help you understand what I'm saying, right? And so, now this is not in the Bible, right? You are never reading the Bible where it says cleanliness is next to godliness, right? That is not textual, right? However, it's a good concept. People always say it all the time, but, cleanliness is next to godliness. No, but just look at the whole thing. We're stewards of this planet. That's very preachable. That's very teachable. And so, if it's not, then that means that you have a political concern that has to be flushed out. With asthma rates in Los Angeles that are sky high, even in West Oakland, right? It's the most polluted area at 4 o'clock Pacific time in maybe the state of California, because you got trucks that are lined up that have to idle and have to get the stuff. It's not working. Yes. It's not working, so with that said, then my passion, I hope you can feel my energy now, right? Yes. I'm for real about this. I have grandchildren, right? I'll have great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. I want them to breathe clean air. I want them to have drinkable water, right? And if that doesn't resonate, then you need to check your politics, throw those out the window and get into the human stain and understand that this is about the love train, and everything else is just a Coke and a smile.
That's right. That's right. Well, thanks, Curtis. I appreciate that. And again, I love the fact that what we saw when we first were putting up the solar, that the food program that Faith Baptist does was serving 100 tons of food to community members in East Oakland, and now over the last few years, that's bumped up to 300 tons of food. It seems to me that the savings from the solar is helping you guys expand your programs, and that's just phenomenal work. And congratulations on all the success. So now to pivot to bring on our other panelist, Michael Ferrante. Michael, thanks again for joining us, and if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and I guess what made you first become interested in clean energy and climate change solutions?
Thank you, Andres, for having me. And a little disclaimer: I won't be nearly as exciting as the pastor just was, so have to bear with me. But I guess my interest in the sector started about 10 years ago. I actually got my first plug-in Prius, and I remember being fascinated looking at the dashboard and the panel as I was driving, determining how much of my energy consumption was coming from the engine versus from the batteries. And honestly, I probably paid a little too much of attention and caused a few near accidents, but with that. So for me, I would say I started as a hobby, and I started to really start to get educated to how we generate electricity in this country. And then about 4 years ago, two things happened. I traded in my Prius for a Tesla, and second, I actually changed careers, and I left my sector and decided to move over into the renewable energy sector. And I've really been enjoying it. And for me, there's a lot of reasons to focus in the clean energy sector, ranging from, in the deployment of clean energy, ranging from the significant cost savings for those who deploy it, the obvious tangible benefits to the climate itself, and even extending it to the racial and social issues created or exacerbated by the same issue, affecting communities of color a lot more than communities of non-color. So that was my draw, and what's kind of pulled me in and has kept me in a very interested manner.
Thank you, Michael. No, that's a fascinating story, and yeah, I think that looking at your Prius dashboard and experiencing that, I think that's really, at the end of the day, that is what Revolve is trying to accomplish, is allowing people to see it with their own eyes and start to register and start to kind of get clued in. So again, thank you for being one of our first investors with the Recoverable Grant through your donor advised fund. Really appreciate the support, and curious, as an owner of a donor advised fund, what was your motivation for supporting Revolve through a Recoverable Grant?
I mean, to me, it's as simply as I could say it. Like, recoverable grants are just awesome. I mean, just think about it. You're basically lending money. It's the equivalent of a loan, right? A low interest loan or a recoverable grant. You're lending money to a nonprofit who uses that money to fulfill their mission, which is fantastic. And then they pay the money back to the donor advised fund, and you get to do it again, right? So just at the top level, a general recoverable grant is great for those reasons. For me, what drew me to working with Revolve is the fact that I think there's an added layer or an added benefit in making a recoverable grant specifically to Revolve. So not only does a recoverable grant get made to Revolve, who gets to fulfill their nonprofit mission, but the Revolve nonprofit mission is to help other nonprofits. So the other nonprofits get the benefit of reduced electricity costs that they then get to put back into fulfilling their own mission. So in the example that Pastor Curtis shared, right, their food pantry got to expand as a result of the relationship, and that's incredible. So it's nice that you get to make the grant. It gets paid back. Another nonprofit helps. They extend their services. As you said, more people get educated. Hopefully, more solar gets deployed, and then you get to do it again. I think it's like one of those very unicorn, rare moments of like a win-win-win-win scenario across so many different constituents. So that's kind of what drew us to make the grant.
Fantastic, and thanks again for all the support. And particularly, would love to hear, especially for those on the call today who are DAF owners. What was the process like for you, working with the managers of your donor advised fund? Had they heard of recoverable grants before? Were they familiar with the process? Sure. And how did that go for you?
I would say if we've had 42 minutes of niceties and pleasantries on the call, it'll be a little bumpy for the next 30 seconds. Honestly, it was a bit of a bumpy road to get the grant made. So I mean, but there's some reasons for that I think I'll get into. But I go back to what my parents used to tell me, and very few things of value in life come without a little bit of work. So I put making the recoverable grant into the category of a little bit of work. It wasn't a lot of work, but it was a little bit of work. For anyone who's had a donor advised fund, to make a simple grant is easy. You go in, you either make a call or you click through the system and you make a grant and you get confirmations it's approved and you made. There wasn't an easy push the button process to make the recoverable grant. So in fact, when I first, my donor advised fund is actually through Morgan Stanley Gift. So my account's with Morgan Stanley, and when I first called them to make the recoverable grant, I was actually told they don't make recoverable grants, and I had known that wasn't correct from Andreas, exposing all of us to the concept of recoverable grants, and to my own research. And I knew they made them. So I politely asked to speak to a director in the area, and within a day I was connected to that individual. And they did in fact confirm that they do make recoverable grants, but it's a bit of a kludgy process inside of Morgan Stanley at the time. So we turned away for a couple of months, not a daily occurrence, but a little back and forth over a couple of months. And then honestly, Morgan Stanley began to work directly with Capshift. And once Capshift got involved, the process was then easy. So when I said before it was a bumpy road, once Capshift got involved, it was easy. Within a few weeks of Capshift getting involved, the recoverable grant was made, funds transferred over, and the recoverable grant was in place. So, and now Morgan Stanley has an ongoing relationship with Capshift, and Capshift does have relationships with many other of the national donor advised funds. And even if your donor advised fund is not at a Capshift connected place, Capshift can still assist with the process. So, sometimes if you're the first going through a process with an entity, you're helping pave a course. And I found myself in that case, and right now I think that it should be an easier process, specifically at Morgan Stanley, and again with Capshift's involvement pretty much elsewhere too.
Thanks for that, Michael. And other recoverable grants that we've received have been from Fidelity, so at least those two institutions have gone through the process. And just lastly, Michael, do you have any insights that you'd want to share with anybody who's listening who might be interested in making a recoverable grant?
I'm sorry, you cut out a bit there, Andres. I didn't hear the question.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying if, lastly, do you have any insights that you might want to share to anybody who's listening who might be interested in making a recoverable grant?
I'm not sure if I have any worldly insights, but I could give you a little bit about sort of my wife and I's experience in making the recoverable grant. Look, originally when we set up our donor advised fund at Morgan Stanley, sort of we were given standard investment options of what the money could be invested in inside of Morgan Stanley donor advised fund, right? You were basically given choices of putting it in stocks, bonds, et cetera, cash. Basically the concept was treated like a balanced, balanced portfolio to us. And what I love about the recoverable grants is I think it brings three unique things to the process. First, it enables you to fully support a nonprofit organization that you already may have been supporting. So there's a great link there. And second, I look at it as, to some regards, portfolio diversification, right? So instead of just having your assets in stocks and bonds, right, in quote unquote in the market, right, I look at a recoverable grant specifically to Revolve as investing in an uncorrelated asset. Right now, I have stocks, bonds, and solar panels that are in my investment portfolio, right? And as those dollars come back, you get to redeploy it. And to me, that's the third great thing is when the dollars come back, you do get to redeploy them. And I'm watching the flow. It's pretty fun to be part of. So we jumped in and made the grant. Any sort of like last words I would say is, look, follow your heart. If you have an organization that you really like, maybe Revolve's on the list, that's great. And they have the ability to return the funds in a recoverable grant, I think you should go for it. Like my view is if you've set up a donor advised fund, you've kind of already given away the money once, right? And a recoverable grant is really cool because you get to give the money away, right? And then give it away again, and then give it away again as the recoverable grant is paid back. So, I think that's, obviously a very powerful part of it, and just have fun with it.
Thanks, Michael. Really appreciate that. Well, thanks to both of you for working with Revolve in the ways that you have. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to lead us through some Q&A so we can hear from the audience and answer any specific questions you all have.
Thank you, Andreas. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to head over to the Q&A. And some of these questions we can answer on this call. Some we might have to get back to on an individual basis. There may be some nuance in some of these questions that maybe need to be handled one-on-one, but we'll do our best to get through the ones that we can get to. So the first question is probably going to be for Emma, which is, how can I start a donor advised fund, and who are the best donor advised fund providers?
Absolutely. We love these questions. This is our favorite kind of question to receive. In terms of next steps, if you're interested in starting a donor advised fund, just reach out to Revolve. We're coordinating with Revolve. So once you reach out to Revolve, we'll work with them and work with you on the next steps to set up a donor advised fund and really leverage the grant dollars and your donor advised fund assets to create the change that you really care about. in terms of the best donor advised fund providers, each provider is very different. So it's really case by case. And we at Capshift do have expertise in helping match you with the donor advised fund provider that's best aligned with your interests.
Thank you, Emma. The next question is recovery and repayment an outright obligation, or is it contingent upon Revolve satisfying specified success metrics? Andreas, would that be you, or is that Emma?
I've got a take on it, but I'll let Emma speak to it as the expert.
Excellent. So this is a great question, and it especially highlights what's so exciting and unique about recoverable grants, as opposed to other types of support, such as debt and investments that have also been mentioned on this call. For recoverable grants specifically, repayment is based on success metrics. So a core difference between a loan or another type of investment and a recoverable grant is that if Revolve were financially unable to repay the funds, the recoverable grant would just be a grant. So in this way, it's very flexible and a supportive type of funding for Revolve in supporting the work that they're doing. And in a success scenario, great, you have money back, so you can do even more grant making. And if it turns out that what Revolve really needs is a grant, then it just stays a grant.
Thank you, Emma. Great. The next question is, are you set up already so that small unaccredited investors can contribute using the federal equity crowd investing rules? Emma or Andreas, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure if that was directed at Revolve or Capshift, but for Revolve, we're limiting the recoverable grant investment opportunity right now to foundations and donor advised funds. So we're really, we would like to broaden it and include, crowd investment and things like that. But at the moment, we're starting with this particular subgroup of foundations and donor advised funds. I don't know, Emma, if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
All right, thank you, Andreas. I will just quickly say, Andreas, we're going to have our contact information at the end. Is that correct? We have a slide.
Yes,
Okay, all right, great. So for anyone who does want to reach out, we are going to have that contact information at the end of the webinar. Let's see. Some more questions have come in, so I have to catch up and see which ones we can answer. So just give me a second. Let's see. There's a question about ITC and depreciation benefits handled through the transactions. That's when we would need to get back to on an individual basis. We don't have the specific information. I think it's handled on a case by case. Is that right?
I think one thing I would say.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I guess we all have responses here. One thing I would say very briefly is that a recoverable grant is very different than an investment. A recoverable grant is not a security. And so that's a core piece of kind of as we talk about recoverable grants, and highlighting what Sarah said of feel free to reach out to us for more information. We're happy to dive into the weeds. And Andreas, I'll also toss it over to you.
Yeah, so the investment tax credit and depreciation benefits for solar that are what are huge drivers in the industry, as I mentioned earlier on, are much more difficult to monetize when it comes to nonprofits, both the customers that we serve as well as Revolve being a nonprofit. Now, in the past, we actually did have, partnership where we were monetizing tax credits for some time. At the end of last year, we all in the industry thought that the ITC was going away. And so now it's actually been extended at 26% for this year and next. Although because of the scale of projects that we're doing, we are not monetizing the ITC or depreciation at this time, which is partly why we're going after this recoverable grant opportunity as opposed to partnering with tax equity investors. So it is a bit different than your traditional solar investment that would include a tax equity investor, but in that way, it makes this a lot more simple and clean from a transactional perspective.
Thank you. All right, here's a question. Can this work for a private or family foundation, or is this just for donors with donor advised funds?
This and Emma, correct me if I'm wrong, but this will work for either. Foundations, private family foundations, or donor advised funds can make this recoverable grant. One of the things that, and I'll also actually use this opportunity to point out for the larger foundations that are more familiar with program related investments or PRIs, Revolve could also accept PRIs instead of a recoverable grant. So we're really flexible around that. My understanding, one of the reasons why we have been promoting the recoverable grant concept is that because it's a pretty easy process as opposed to a program related investment, which can sometimes require a lot of administrative work and processing. A recoverable grant is a short contract. Some of these contracts are only 2 pages as opposed to reams of documents that need to be vetted. So that being said, we're flexible. We can take PRIs from larger foundations if they already have that process set up and prefer that. But if this concept of lending money from the foundation or donor advised fund is new, the recoverable grant is a very simple process, and we're happy to work with any and all philanthropic investors.
Great, thank you. 2 really quick final questions, and then let's move on to the closing. So the first, these are both about repayment of the recoverable grant. So once it's paid back, let's see. So once the recovered grant is paid back and you deploy another grant, is the second grant tax deductible? It's one question. Maybe Emma, you know the answer to that.
Yes, and I'm happy to tackle both of these because I think these seem very nuts and bolts on the recoverable grant side. Also, again, love these questions. Cycling back to what Michael said earlier, this is a really innovative structure. It's cutting edge, and so these kinds of questions are totally normal as we talk about this new kind of tool you can use. I'll mention one more time that we do have a conversation on this later this week if you really want to dive in even more to the details, and you're always welcome to reach out to Revolve with any future questions. So once the recoverable grant is paid back and you deploy another grant, to address that question, due to the way that private foundations and donor advised funds work, when you initially contribute the dollars into, and I'll take donor advised funds as an example, when you initially contribute the dollars into your donor advised fund, that is when you receive the tax deduction. So with the grant then going out of your donor advised fund and cycling back in and then re-granting it, that doesn't play a role in the tax deduction that you receive because you've already received it upfront. For the second question about whether once recoverable grants are paid back, perfectly phrasing it as streams come back in, the streams come back in straight into your account and are available for any future grants, recoverable grants, or investments that you would like to make. So yes, they are deployable as soon as they come back in, even in piecemeal.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Great questions, everyone. Thank you so much for your participation. And with that, I'd like, if you have any other questions, we're going to have the contact information at the end. So with that, I'm going to leave it, turn it back over to Andreas to wrap us up and give you that contact information. So thank you so much.
Great. Well, thanks, Sarah. And thanks to Emma and Michael and Pastor Curtis. And thanks to everybody who chimed in with those great questions. So I'll just leave you with this final thought. To me, Revolve has been working at the front lines of community-based clean energy for a decade. And I have never been more excited about our opportunity to grow and scale and achieve our impact than right now. And it's because of this recoverable grant opportunity. And it's just, as Michael said earlier, it's a win-win-win. And to me, it's just such a powerful concept. So allow me to walk you through what I think are, really this incredible way to triple the impact of your philanthropic capital. As Emma mentioned, whether you've started a donor advised fund and already put that money in, or whether it's a foundation and endowment, that money is already geared to do good in the world. But through this, you can actually triple the amount of good that you're doing. The first is, as I mentioned earlier, the EIA report made it very clear this week, this is the decade that we need to solve the climate crisis. So as much capital as we can invest in clean energy right now, the better. Actually, also this week, a report came out that said of all the philanthropy that happened in 2019, only 2% went into climate and energy. Only 2% of all the philanthropic dollars. When we go to a restaurant, we tip a server 20%, even if the service is lousy. So we can do better than 2% into climate and energy. And this is one way to do it. The second is that, as Michael mentioned earlier, you're not only helping fight the climate crisis, you're also helping that nonprofit, whether that's a homeless shelter, a food bank, a health clinic. Those organizations, especially now, could use as much support for their operations as possible, and solar energy allows us to do that. And the third is you get all that money back with interest, which you can then re-grant to whomever you would like, as you originally intended to do so when you started that DAF or foundation. So that's how it's 3 times the impact of a typical grant. Next steps for those of you that are interested would be to reach out to me. Here's my email address and phone number. We would love to set up a meeting and talk with you. You could also go to our website and sign up there for more information about the recoverable grants. And I would just want to say thank you all for all the support, for helping us achieve the mission that we have. And I invite you to join us in this next decade so that we may make the dreams of a climate justice transition, a clean energy justice transition happen as quickly as possible, bringing solar energy to those who need it most. So thank you all so much for your time today. And I look forward to being in touch with you in the future. Take good care and keep up the good work that you all are doing in this space. Thank you.